Hi, welcome to the channel and thanks for stopping by. My name is Chris, and in today's video we're talking about something that's really important for antique dealers and resellers of all stripes. By the time you bring a unique item to the market for sale, you've incurred a number of costs, including everything that you spent on your hunting trip. So that's gas, that's insurance on your car, that's the food that you spend when you're out looking. And then you've also got costs associated with acquiring the item, with transporting it back, repairing it, conditioning it. You've got marketing costs in some cases. And then if you're selling at an antique booth, you have antique booth fees, you have commissions at online marketplaces, and then travel and costs associated with antique shows. So there are a lot of costs involved. And in today's video, we're going to talk about a number of things that we can take into consideration in terms of, making sure that we don't leave a lot of money on the table. Because as antique dealers, if we do that more than once or twice, we're not antique dealers anymore. So let's discuss a number of things that we can do to ensure that we get top dollar. We have satisfaction in our experience when we sell our antiques. We all love it when we're outsourcing and we come across an unexpected opportunity to acquire an amazing item. But it's only amazing if the price is right. So it's really helpful to have your own personal formula for calculating right there on the spot whether there's enough built-in value in this item at this purchase price to allow for profit and to help us determine whether it's worth buying. So stay with me till the end of the video, because I'm actually going to share with you my own personal formula for a quick mental calculation that will help me determine whether or not an item makes sense to buy. Can I sell it for a low enough price that will make it attractive to a buyer, but also still have enough room in there to cover all of my expenses and give me a profit for my time and effort? So most videos like this will start off by telling you to check the online marketplaces like Facebook Marketplace and eBay, and to check the sold listings so that you can know what items actually went for instead of what the asking price is, because a person can ask anything they want. It's more important to find out what actually the item sold for. So Facebook Marketplace has a feature that you may not be aware of. If you see an item that's similar to something that you would like to sell, you can add it to your favorited list within the marketplace, and you'll be able to watch that item to see how long it sells for. Once it sells, it isn't immediately deleted from your favorited list. It'll indicate that the item has sold, and you'll know whether the item was attractive enough at that price in order to sell within a reasonable amount of time. And you may not be privy to any negotiation that happened between the buyer and seller, but you'll know at the asking price, was it interesting enough to attract somebody to get the conversation started. One underutilized feature of Facebook is Facebook groups. And these are really helpful because there are hundreds of groups out there that are focused entirely on valuing antiques and vintage items. They can be really helpful because they're large communities and you can get lots of eyeballs on your item, and people will comment, you'll get compliments, they'll let you know if it's not what you think it is. And it's just really a very helpful place to get a broad idea of the value of your item. One caveat that I'd like to put forward to you is that the veterans in some of these groups, they've seen thousands of drive-by postings. People have found things in their attic, they've inherited items, and they'll pop into the group for just one post. And they've seen time and time again where somebody will visit the group and they'll have an overinflated idea of what the value of their item is. And so I've seen in many cases where veterans have kind of undervalued antiques in order to try to rein in that person and set more realistic expectations as to the value of their item. For me, when I get a number of responses, I try to focus on the ones where a person has had a similar item in the past and they're taking the time to tell me about it and their experience of what they sold it for. I also like to focus on the responses where someone takes the time to tell me a little bit more about my item, to educate me about it, because they want to be helpful, and chances are much more likely that they know what they're talking about and they are giving me accurate information as to the value of the item. For most items, the online marketplaces are a great go-to place to get started in valuing your items. But for someone like me who tends to deal in more unusual items, quirky items, imported things that are not native to the market where I'm trying to sell them, it helps to have an alternative method for establishing the value. And in my personal process, I tend to have two buckets. And in the first bucket, I put things that I consider to be collectible. Collectible things would be items such as militaria or glassware, porcelain, or, in general, items that I could go to somebody who specializes in that, and very quickly they could look at it and give me a rough estimate of what the value is, because it's a known quantity. So in the second bucket, we have all of the items that have to be priced solely on their decorative value. And it basically means that the value of this item is really more or less what someone is willing to pay for it. It doesn't mean that it's more or less than the collectible items. It just means that the price and the value on this is rooted in the emotions that it can elicit from the person that's looking at it, the novelty of it, the uniqueness of it, the rarity of it, and the overall general interest that you can create in the item. For me, this decorative bucket is the more interesting of the two by far. It offers me a lot of freedom in terms of how I set my price, and I actually have a lot of influence on its value. Like I said, there's no set value, there's no market value for this. It's a unique one-off item. And I have a lot of influence over the perceived value by presenting it in a certain way, associating it with other items, staging it in a way that elicits an emotional response from the buyer. It's just so much more fun that way, and it's really just down to my own salesmanship in terms of my success. Check out these lamps. These are pretty cool 1960s Bakelite lamps, and there's a pair of them. When you have items that are in pairs or complete sets or in runs, that increases the desirability of them, and you can get a lot more money per item. One thing that can be very helpful is to put it in a setting where it's surrounded by other very desirable items. If you've been in the antiques trade for any amount of time, you've probably heard about the website First Dibs. They curate and vet the items that they list on their website, and they have high prices, and the rising tide lifts all boats. So by association, every item there is worth more just as a result of being associated with the other items. When you go to Round Top, Texas, and you visit the antique show, and you stop in at a place like Marburger Farms, the items there, they're priced at this really high premium because they're highly curated and they're staged to perfection. The place looks amazing. So where you're selling your item is a very important consideration. Are you selling it at an antique, like a premier prestigious antique venue in downtown Chicago? Or are you selling at an antique booth in rural Illinois farm town? Different pricing considerations apply in both situations. While we're on the topic of antique markets, one thing that I highly recommend is doing your research at the market. So I recommend that you go very early when all the items are still there, walk around and look for items similar to the items that you're hoping to sell. Take a note of where you saw it, and also, and this is very important, write down the price that the seller is asking. Because when you come back later in the day to see if it's sold, there may be a red sold sticker on it and the price will no longer be there. You might not remember what they were asking for it. But because you did your work ahead of time, you'll have that written down and you'll be able to use that as a reference, and you will know that this was the asking price. It must have been good because he or she was able to move the item during this market. Another thing that markets are very helpful for, they give you the opportunity to network with other people. So when people come into your booth, and especially on the collector side, if somebody's interested in your item, they very likely are a collector and they're informed about items in their niche. So with a little humility, you can reach out and tap into some of that expertise, develop a relationship with the person, and ask them, hey, do you think that I'm on the mark in terms of my pricing? And people very often are willing to share their expertise. They like to be in a mentoring role, and you'll be able to get a lot of information in terms of zeroing in on the best price for your items. Another thing that you want to do is anytime you acquire an item, you want to document the price that you actually paid for it. In a second column, put the amount you would like to ask for it. And in the third column, write down the walkaway price, the absolute lowest that you're willing to sell the item for. And then at the market, don't be afraid to reference that in front of the customer. This can sometimes take the leverage away from a customer who's giving you a cheeky offer. You've got your book, you have your price, and most people can understand that. If you're willing to budge on that a little bit, which you've already calculated into your spreadsheet, everybody comes away happy. Now, when it comes to valuing your antiques, certain kinds of antique items are actually more valuable for showing their wear. For example, farmhouse tables that have the legs showing wear at the very bottom because somebody scrubbed the floors for years and they bumped that rag in again and again over time, and it shows character and it shows wear. that can actually increase the value of the table. Or another example is the armrest of a chair. Someone spent their entire life in that chair, every night reading a book, and the armrest takes on an appearance of like a warm, rubbed look, and this can really improve the quality of the item. In other categories of antiques, the wear can actually be a detriment to the value. Ceramics and glassware, for example, is notorious for losing value because of condition issues such as discoloring or chips around the edges. The best thing to do is kind of look at it, ask yourself, does this wear add to the value or does it take away from it? And you really can't avoid it. There's always going to be a certain amount of negotiation when it comes to selling your antiques. And if you're aware of that ahead of time, you can build in 10 to 15% of the asking price. After a little negotiation, the buyer goes away happy, you're happy, everybody comes away feeling good about the transaction. My particular formula is tailored to my specific situation. As someone buying in Europe, exporting, paying duties, etc., I have to build my costs into my pricing, and you're going to have to do that the same for yourself. You will have your own specific considerations to take into account. Let's look at these lamps once again. They're listed in Poland for 80 zloty, which is about 20 US dollars. Right now, the exchange rate for zloty to dollar is close to 1 to 4. So 80 Polish zloty divided by 4 is 20 US dollars. As a matter of fact, if I divide the price by 4, I have a quarter of it that I can use to buy it, a quarter of it that I can use to transport it, a quarter of it that I can leave myself open for negotiation when I sell it, and then a quarter of it I can apply towards my profit, my earnings for selling the piece. And according to this formula, I can double my money. So I'll get return on my acquisition cost, and I'll also have 1/4 dedicated to my profit. That's a doubling of my money. So the way the math works out is that if there's an item for sale in Poland for 80 zloty, I ask myself, can I sell it for that same amount in US dollars in the US? The USD price is 4 times the Polish price. So that's acquisition, transport and costs, negotiation, and profit. And for me, the formula is really simple. If they're asking 80 zloty for it, I say, can I sell it for $80? Then I have each of those 4 stages built into my selling price. And you'll have to come up with your own formula, especially if you're just in the US buying US items. It'll be a little bit different calculation. But one good rule of thumb is that you shouldn't buy items that cost you more than 1/3 of your selling prices. So if you want an asking price of $100, you shouldn't pay more than $33 for it. On high dollar items, you might be able to go up to 50% because you're basically doubling your money. Or if items that are like, they're stone cold sellers that you know it'll take no time at all to flip, then you can, push past that 30%. So this formula will be really helpful in the heat of the moment because it'll make you more confident. You know what you can do, you know what you can't. And when you come at the negotiation from a more confident place, you're going to be much happier with the final result. And if you can't earn money on it, then you need to walk away. Keep moving. There's going to be something else. Thanks again for visiting my channel, and we'll see you soon.